Jason Murphy, Against the Stream, Wednesday night. Welcome, those of you in person and those of you on our Zoom channel, and those of you that are at the Against the Stream YouTube channel in the future world. Appreciate you. I feel like we're just going to kind of get started. You know, something that I love about when it gets cold, when it gets wintry, is I'm kind of like a bear. Like I like want to just meditate. I kind of want to hibernate and meditate and just try to stay warm. But I and oftentimes when I have practiced, like done long periods of retreat, it's usually during winter months, like February, March, January, February. Yeah. So I'm not going to give a lot of instruction tonight. I kind of just want to sit and just kind of move into sitting. So um, I'll give a little instruction for those of you who are new. And for those of you who are old, been around a little while, see if you can just allow my instructions to be kind of in the background of your attention and really settle into just whatever practice suits you the best. Present time, experience, here and now, loving kindness, compassion, concentration, body scan, whatever works best for you. And then we'll have some discussion. Oh, I just realized that we have a Buddha replacement. What's that? All right, so finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, where you can feel relaxed and alert. And opening up to the comings and the goings of sound. Sound is a great opportunity for us to be connected to this present time experience. And then if you can, you can include the sensations of the body. Of course, sound is still arising and passing away. My voice, traffic, sounds outside the room, sounds inside the room. Nothing is left out. And when you feel settled, perhaps allow the attention to rest on the experience of breathing without attending to the breath. The body breathes itself. But we can observe the breath just like sound and sensations in the body, just naturally arising, staying for a time, passing away. And the invitation is that for the purpose of this meditation, there's nothing worth thinking. Thoughts are still going to happen, ideas, memories. Just see if we can de emphasize the thinking mind. And just focus on one of the other senses. Or even the dance of all the other senses. Of course, allowing the breath to be an anchor, rooting you back into this present time experience. You can become increasingly curious. What's happening with this breath? whenever we recognize that the attention may have wandered off, just recognizing where it's gone, future or past, some story, some random song from 1995. And then just simply aiming the attention back without judgment or criticism. It's just the mind. Just like the ear hears, the mind thinks. Again and again, recognizing when the attention wanders off, and with a sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, aiming the attention back. Can we allow the peace and ease that is the natural peace and ease of the mind, the resting place, to emerge? I'm going to start with a poem. I also want to just acknowledge that we have a group of our Sangha, our community, that is in Joshua Tree right now, and they're 3 days deep into a 7-day silent meditation retreat, which is such a juicy place to be if you've ever sat on a meditation retreat. And I just want to acknowledge that that's happening right now, and they're working hard for their own freedom, and have chosen to take a week off, or been privileged enough to be able to take a week off and sit and practice. And I can't think of a better way to take a vacation. You know, Hawaii, Mexico, silent meditation retreat. So I just want to acknowledge that they're out there working hard, and wish them well. This is a poem you may have heard before, but maybe it's been a long time. It's called "Oh, the Places You'll Go." I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too. Games you can't win because you'll play against you. All alone, whether you like it or not. Alone, you will be something quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance that you'll meet some things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. Oh, you will go, on you will go, though the hack and cracks howl. Onward, up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and your sneakers may leak. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll go far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know, and you'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure where you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot from your left. The Dharma of Dr. Seuss. And I just kind of felt like reading that today. So it was between that and the Velveteen Rabbit. You want to hear the Velveteen Rabbit too?
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. What is real? Asked the rabbit one day. Real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long time. Not just play with you, but really loves you. Then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. But when you're real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once or bit by bit? Asked the rabbit. It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. To become real takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easy or who have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair is loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and are very shabby. But these things don't matter at all because once you are real, you can't be ugly. Except to people who don't understand. Once you are real, you can't become unreal again. And it lasts for always. Dharma of the Velveteen Rabbit. Now, the skill, how do I turn that into fitting into my topic? There's a lot of wisdom in children's stories, you know? And there's some in Dr. Seuss, but I just love that one, you know? And the Velveteen Rabbit. So, you know, I've been talking about the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and kind of laying out step by step the folds and how the folds play out. Last week we talked about karma, we talked about rebirth, a little bit about rebirth. You know, rebirth is so, and that was Wise View, the kind of entry place into the understanding or the wisdom of the Dharma. And today I'm going to talk a little bit more about really what's considered the first step, which is right action or wise action. And I want to just illuminate a few things. The Four Noble Truths are a prescription of how we become free from the suffering that we cause ourselves. And the first three truths are really designed to break denial, to see our own delusions, our own kind of ignorance, and to break free from that. And then the fourth noble truth is, okay, now let's get to work, right? Now that you hopefully are no longer, you know, or at least for a moment or two, you're able to see clearly. It's like the clouds part. But the path really doesn't just consist of mindfulness, concentration, and insight practices, which is a lot of times that's what people want when they come to the Dharma. Dharma meaning truth or truth in nature. But really, ethics are at the beginning of the path. Like, how do we live in an ethical way? And why? Why do it? Why does that matter? You know, oftentimes, you know, what we call the precepts are discarded, and especially a lot of the kind of more mainstream mindfulness kind of practices that have been becoming more and more popular over the last 20 years or so. Some of which I've studied and participated in and find it's useful, but I've always felt grounded and wanted to be grounded in Buddhism, feeling like the foundation of Buddhism is really the wellspring of all of these other mindfulness practices. And so it's important, I think, to come back to, okay, what is being whitewashed away in the Mick mindfulness movement because of comfort or ease or quick fix, and can we reclaim that? And a lot of there's been, you know, I don't know, I've read maybe 4 or 5 articles from pretty I don't know, pretty big magazines, I guess, about how the mindfulness movement, the kind of um, let's go to a mindfulness course or do an online course or something like that, how that misses the real transformation that can take place. It's helpful to learn to focus the mind. It's helpful to learn to concentrate. It's helpful to learn to develop mindfulness and awareness. But without ethics and without heart practices, it's lacking. And I mean, I know this because this is what I've studied for 30 years, right? But now it's like it's starting to come out more and more that, okay, like there's more depth to be had here. Even in the psychology world, there was a lot of like, oh, mindfulness, and I actually call myself a mindfulness-based psychotherapist. I've actually started to say more Buddhist psychologist or Buddhist psychotherapist. But there has been a development known as depth psychology, which is kind of bringing more and more of this kind of let's look at ethics, let's look at how are we living in a way that is non-harming, along with meditation, concentration, and whatnot. So basically, this is part of a course of therapy. The precepts, the ethical living, is a part of a course of therapy that the Buddha laid out 2,560 years ago. First is like, okay, come out of denial, and then let's look at how are we living in the world that is causing us suffering or wounds of the mind. This is a course of therapy for wounded minds. And that's why I often will say that the Buddha was the first psychiatrist. He was the first psychoanalyst. Because that was his goal. That was his only goal, actually. Free yourself from the wounds of your mind and transform your mind and your life in the process. So one of the aspects that I think is pretty relevant today is low self-esteem, and what underlies low self-esteem or low self-worth. And so when we look, we'll kind of break that down. When our actions, don't measure up, so there's a couple ways of looking at it. When our actions don't measure up to a certain set or standards of behavior, right? So whether that's internally or externally, there's a couple ways in which we tend to react. One is to regret the action and then maybe change the action if we don't move back into denial. Or two, engage of one of two kinds of denial, either denying that our actions did in fact happen. So kind of like just like making excuses, minimizing, rationalizing, or even just flat out simple denial. Simple denial is like that. It's like Bart Simpson denial, right? Like, that didn't happen. You didn't see me. I didn't do it, right? Simple denial. So the second level is to deny that the standards of measurement are really valid. So this is the kind of intellectualizing, the kind of gaslighting, the kind of minimizing that happens when if other people, it's like, oh, well, I actually do this sometimes where I'm like, the driving rules aren't really, they don't all apply. Only the ones that I feel like following. Those are the ones that apply. And the rest, they're just kind of, if you've ever driven in India, like, yeah, there's more accidents maybe, but, we all just kind of go with the flow, right? So that's like a way of just denying the standard of measurement, right? So the other thing that happens is that we tend to bump up against the ego. We bump up against our own ego when we're working with with ethical integrity, right? So these reactions are, as I was saying before, they're like wounds of the mind. And if you think about what do I mean? Like, literally wounds. Like regret is an open wound, right? Tender to the touch, while denial is a hardened, twisted scar tissue around a tender spot. So if you think about, regret is just keeps coming back, painful over and over. Guilt, regret, plagues the mind. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. Maybe you've never felt guilty, like literally legitimately regretted an action, right? But plagues the mind very often, causing depression also very often. And then this kind of hardened, twisted scar tissue, this is the denial aspect of, like, pushing it down and not fully attending to the wound. And then it kind of hardens, scarifies or calcifies over an unhealed wound. Sometimes I think about it like a splinter. And actually, the Buddha gave a description about looking out over like an audience of people in some grove or another, and saying that he could see the splinter of suffering in the minds of those present, and he wished he could remove the splinter of suffering from each mind, but he knew that he couldn't. All he could do is teach the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and give each of us the tool to remove it ourselves. So you may have noticed that in meditation, when we're kind of forced to stay present, sometimes we may tense or contort the mind, right? And insight, it's hard to gain. Only if the mind is free of the wounds and scars can it be really able to settle. And this is partially, this was my experience when I first started meditating, and I had so much regret, so much remorse, so much denial, so much pain that I had been avoiding or, anesthetizing with drugs and alcohol, or, pushing down in some way, distracting from, that I became acutely aware. And, a lot of times I work with people, and they'll say, I have a really hard time sleeping. My mind starts racing at night as soon as my head hits the pillow, and to explore that a little bit, it is often the same thing that would happen if somebody just comes to sit down in meditation. Like the mind, if you have an idle mind, what is there, right? This actually, from a neuropsychological perspective, is called the default mode network. The default mode network is, what's your resting brain like? And that's a good barometer for how many wounds there are in the mind, or how well, or how much peace and ease is present. One of my teachers, Ajahn Pasanno, basically gave me that teaching, saying peace and ease is the resting place of the mind. The natural state of the mind is peace and ease. So why aren't I experiencing that? And that was the question. So why, if you are, great, wonderful. And if you're not, what's that about? Let's look towards that. Let's allow some more space for that. So one of the ways that's talked about is to work with the precepts. And so, what are the precepts? Precepts, first of all, are very different from, in the Western view, it's considered sometimes it's considered kind of morality, or in Western religions, it's considered kind of morality, a moral code. A lot of religions kind of spout a moral code. Although I have found that a lot of people spout the moral code, don't actually follow through with the moral code, right? The religions that I have investigated both personally and academically. But there are those and even in Buddhism, right? So let's just look at what they are. Okay, wise. Sila is the word, which often is considered more the moral code, but I like to think of it more as ethics or ethical integrity. So one is abstinence, just in general, abstinence from substances that cloud the mind or lead to what's called heedlessness, right? And if you think about that, abstinence from substances that cloud the mind, there's a little bit of room there, but that's really thinking about what do we consume? What are we consuming that is about checking out? That leads to heedlessness, which means not being able to kind of see clearly how our actions are affecting others. And the whole aspect of what's called sila is encompassed by a word called ahimsa. And ahimsa means, basically, it's like the Hippocratic Oath, like do no harm. It means harmlessness. And so the intention is to do no harm to self or to others. And that's the intention. And then so it breaks down a little further. So to not consume substances that harm self or others. Right?
Here's something I found on the web.
Whoa.
According to ct.gov.
Let's turn that off. That is weird. Camera on? Whoa. What? Did Noah's like spying on me. I'm not paranoid. Falsehoods, right? To not lie, to watch how we speak to each other or about people. So slander, harsh speech, and useless words is considered under the ethical integrity group. The other is considered wise action, and so wise action is to abstain from killing. Yeah, it's good to not go around just killing randoms, but it's actually there, again, connected to karma. The idea of not killing, it doesn't just mean not killing people, right? It even goes down to not killing ants, not killing flies, not killing mosquitoes. And I've worked with this in varying success. In my life, both in the past. I remember this really being at a monastery and taking on this precept and taking it very seriously. And I also at this time loved to sit early in the morning, like at dawn, and in most humid countries or states, dawn is the time that mosquitoes love to eat. And so I was sitting, and this was going on for several days. And I would, put on some like mosquito repellent that seemed like it was attracting them, not they were just like drinking it like Kool-Aid. And I would get really angry, and I would shoo them away or whatever. And it was totally disrupting my meditation. I was not able to settle my mind. I had wounds in my mind, right? I was afflicted, and I wanted to kill them. And then at some point, I just said, I just resigned to, I'm gonna just let them have as much of my blood as they wanted during the time that I was meditating. And I just resigned to allowing, and actually I think at one point I actually turned to, and there was a few, little mosquito bites, of course I wore a long sleeve shirt and I put a hood on and a beanie and, did what I could to not have a lot of exposure, but it also was very hot. But anyway, I just remember resigning to just allowing the experience and then turning it more into this is just sensation happening in my experience. And then within a very short period of time, I was no longer suffering about it, and I didn't even really get a lot of bites. And I actually ended up turning into some kind of a loving kindness practice where I was like, offering my blood. May I sustain the mosquitoes for one more, half a day that they're actually going to live. And then they're just all of a sudden I was able to concentrate the mind. So this kind of idea, and again, I'm not saying I haven't killed the spider. I have. I try to remove them, but it doesn't always work out. So anyway, to varying degrees. So stealing and sexual misconduct are also under wise action. So there's abstain from killing, abstaining from stealing. And when I think about stealing, so first of all, I have been a klepto, absolutely. And I actually spent some time of my life just believing that the world owed me, particularly large corporations and stores and bosses, like I would steal toilet paper from I was like in my early 20s. I'd steal toilet paper from my job because they weren't paying me enough for me to be able to buy toilet paper, which wasn't totally true, but that was my rationalization, right? And then coming to a point of recognizing that actually I think it was either being at the monastery or being on a meditation retreat, being on a teen meditation retreat where I used to teach, and feeling that everyone would just leave their iPads or leave their cell phones or leave their backpacks or leave their stuff everywhere because everyone in this place felt safe because no one worried about anything getting stolen. And while I was there for several years working, I was particularly thinking about this teen meditation retreat. For several years, I would work 3 retreats a year, and we would have different kids each time. And out of the several years, there was only one incident where someone had taken, maybe it was either a wallet or an iPad. I kind of can't remember. Someone got their backpack broken into, and then that person gave it back, came and said, you know what, I'm sorry, it was an impulse, and I did this, and they gave it back, and they were totally forgiven and finished the rest of it was really amazing to see that happen. So that kind of, coming to some kind of understanding about really what sila means is harmony. It's not about moral right and wrong. It's actually about harmonizing our own hearts and mind. What's the integrity of our own hearts and minds, and then harmonizing with others. So how do you stay in harmony with others? Well, you don't fight them. You don't talk shit about them. You don't steal from them. And then sexual misconduct is another aspect in the wise action. And what's meant about by sexual misconduct really ultimately means to, again, do no harm to self or others. And that includes internally, mentally, and particularly taking actions to not cause harm with one's own sexuality towards oneself or others. And that has all kinds of nuances, like not manipulating people around sex, like not committing adultery, not protecting children or people who have been maybe abused sexually. There's all of these kind of different levels of that. But ultimately, for us to decide for ourselves, what does that mean? What does that mean to be wise with our sexuality? To be non-harming with our sexuality? to not use our sexual energy or speech or actions to manipulate another. Can you imagine if everyone did that? You know, it would be a different world. Yeah, even just the non-killing part. Can you imagine if just everyone on this planet just took on the precept to not kill? You know, the experience would be very different. So the other aspects of this group of ethical integrity is considered wise livelihood. So just to kind of recap, we have kind of wise speech, which is to abstain from falsehoods, slander, harsh speech, and useless words. We have wise action, which is to abstain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and also abstinence of substances that cloud the mind. And then wise livelihood is avoid any means of livelihood that involves harming or exploiting of others. Avoid any means of livelihood that involves harming or the exploitation of others. And we have to make that decision for ourselves. I've had some people say, like, what about being a lawyer? Are you exploiting others? Are you causing harm? Well, I mean, I think I actually know some lawyers that fight for good all the time, that help to support. Like I have a friend of mine who's a lemon law lawyer for when they buy a bad car, someone buys a bad, or their car, doesn't like something manufactural, breaks on it or whatever, and then he helps them get the car companies to give them a new car, pay them a settlement, whatever the situation is. But like, I think mainly drug dealing, um, uh, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, these kind of, exploitation, some would say bartender, it just really, I think paying attention to what that means for you. And that's a really key component of what the precepts are. The precepts are not a predetermined set of laws that you must follow. They're not commandments. They are suggestions that the Buddha gave about how to heal the wounds of the mind. So one of the things I love about Buddhism is that the Buddha came to this realization for himself by viewing his own mind, by doing exactly what we teach to do here, gaining insight, looking clearly, pulling back the covers, coming out of denial, seeing clearly the cause of suffering being our own actions, our own choices, very often. And then saying, so he had this moment where it's called ahimsa. No, it's called, what is it called? Hold on, there's so many of those words. I can't remember, but they're called skillful and unskillful actions. And to see the mental faculties that lead to skillfulness and peace and ease, and the unskillful faculties in the mind that lead to unskillfulness, that lead to torments of mind, regret, remorse. This is one of the things that he began to kind of discover and then later teach. So the precepts don't only, they're not just like I said, they're not just like commandments, right? They're designed to heal the wounds and scars, like help to create and build healthy self-esteem, comes from living a set of standards. And these standards from the Buddhist perspective are practical, clear-cut, humane, and worthy of respect. and this is the kind of Buddhist perspective of that, and that Buddhism is a non-theistic framework that grounds itself in ethics, not in obedience, but to be in harmony, right? So this is why I don't like the word like morality, because that really comes from a Western religious perspective. So the observance of these ethical principles, they really help to harmonize society on several levels. First on a social level, and then on a psychological level, and then on a karmic level, and then on a contemplative level. So these are the kind of ways in which they're talked about. And so on a social level, the principle of non-harming helps to establish harmonious interpersonal relationships. I kind of gave some examples of that, like if you don't have to worry about me stealing from you, you're going to be more likely to trust me. If we're all entering into this understanding of non-harming around sexuality or around harsh speech or these kinds of things, then there's an ease that can happen, and that's hopefully what the folks that are on the retreat are experiencing right now, some peace and ease, having really followed, and everyone's agreed this is a standard. So, and then on a psychological level, we're talking about harmony to the mind, right? To the protection from the inner split or cause of guilt, remorse, and denial. And one of the things many of us have, not in all aspects of Buddhism, but here and Against the Stream or in the Theravadan tradition, again, and just so you know, Theravada, there's two main schools: Theravadan, which means the path of the elders or the narrow path, and then Mahayana, which means the greater or larger path. And that's basically the two main schools of Buddhism. And I like things the hard way, so I chose the narrow path, or the path of the elders, meaning the closest to the actual teachings of the Buddha. But anyway, in Thailand, and then when we go on retreat with us, we have these things called protection cords, and not just in Thailand, in Burma, and just about any Theravadan country. And protection cords are a little bit misleading, like I have a couple protection cords on my wrist. I almost always have one. But it's not a shield. It's not going to protect me from the world like it's a magic spell that I'm going to get like somehow taken care of, or, the Buddha's, watching me or something like that. It's not like that at all. And some people misunderstand that the protection cord is a reminder for me to protect my own mind. It's a reminder. So we take these, we tie these knots, and we have there's like it's also called a blessing cord at times, because we're taking on the commitments, and then taking on some kind of intention around following the precepts, and then knowing that it's not going to stay here forever, on my wrist, right? Eventually it'll fall off, but that it's to help remind me of the commitments that I have made, and maybe in turn then helping. Maybe it will be a moment of me or others, being reminded and not spilling those moments of suffering out onto the rest of the world, when it comes to agitation or jealousy or anger, or whatever. So that's another way. That's the psychological way that really following these precepts is a way of healing our own hearts and minds, and also protecting ourselves and others in the world. There's there's a sharing of blessings that we do just at the end of every. We'll do it in a few minutes here, and the sharing of blessings is saying, that may all beings benefit from our practice, from my practice, and that doesn't mean like, like there's when I ring the bell, there's some magic dust that gets kind of put out into the world, but it's actually just acknowledging that we're doing the hard work and that this work isn't just for us, but it's actually by me transforming my mind, and allowing less suffering to spill out, then there's a natural kind of cascading that takes it, or what they call it, the butterfly effect or something. So that's another way of kind of looking at it. And then karmically, on a karmic level, the observance of these ethics or these precepts, it ensures harmony with the law of karma, hence kind of favorable results in the course of the future movement through life. And I kind of talked about this last week, that karma isn't really about our past. It's about now. It's about how we deal and how we embrace what's happening now, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then that is actually constant. That's the momentum. It's really karmic momentum that we're looking at altering. And sometimes that's really hard to do. Sometimes the karmic momentum from our past is so strong that in the here and now, it's all we can do is bear it, right? Is hold fast. That's all we can do. And then there's other times where there's more pliability, right? There's more ability to make some changes and shifts. And then, on a contemplative level, really, like I've been talking about, this is the preliminary purification of the mind in order to delve into deeper levels of what's called samadhi. Samadhi is concentrated awareness. And this is where insight comes from. That the first, and for me, it was a rough go. It was an uphill battle, and I'm so grateful for this practice. And I'm so grateful that I had teachers that were like, yeah, this shit's tough. And that this is about your purification of mind and about healing the wounds that you've been, avoiding. And that's why I also think it's very akin to therapy. The word wound is also can be translated to the word trauma. It means the same thing. Trauma is the wound. And thera or therapy, healing. So that's exactly what we're doing here, except for you're your own therapist. Or you could come see me. Just playing, but not. I am a therapist. I do see people in my private practice. But anyway, that's enough for now. So questions about what I shared? Any in the room? Any kind of questions, clarifications around the precepts? This really kind of the entry point, harmony, healing the wounds of our minds. Yeah.
You said so many amazing things, but there was something where you was talking about when the wound disappears or goes away. I think you used that language. You said when the wound goes away. But like in my experience, the wound or the scar doesn't go away. Right?
Scar and the wound are different.
Right. The wound heals. The scar is still there. And I like the way you talked about, like when you tend to the wound, like when you look at it, when you unpack it, right? And
Mhm.
then,
When you feel it.
then yeah, you feel it. You have the scar.
Mhm.
Um, so so it's like I guess I just kind of tripped out a little bit on go away. Where for me it's about okay, I accept that there was a wound. You've worked really hard on healing it, and there's always going to be a scar, and then accepting the scar. You know, um,
Yeah.
that works for me. But there was something about going away where I knew you didn't really mean that. Like, you know what I mean? So, I don't know if there's a question there.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think it's a good point, which is that and it's connected, I think, to karma, which is that karmic momentum is still taking place, and the wounds of the mind are going to play themselves out. And my experience is that what seemed like unbearable, impossible to kind of face or deal with, became more manageable, became smaller, became easier, became more I became more tolerable of the like dealing with the pain, kind of like the mosquitoes,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then they were just mosquitoes. They were just actually sensation, you know. Where in the beginning it was like these fucker kill these mosquitoes, because that was just the agitation in my mind. Yeah. Please.
Um, there were so many things that you said. I kind of got lost in everything, but could you just describe the two types of denial that you were talking
Uh-huh.
about?
Yeah. I mean, there's denial that of the. I'm just going to refer back to my notes because I kind of said a lot of things. Yeah. So there's the two kinds of one is denying that the action even happened, the simple denial, right? Like the Bart Simpson denial, and then the other is negating the measurement of the kind of the action, right? Meaning like it wasn't really valid. Like I used the uh, traffic rules as an example. Like, okay, stoplights are good. We kind of need them so we don't crash into each other. But double lines, spotted lines, white lines, eh, that's what I mean. As far as like basically intellectualizing around not taking responsibility for the fact that I can kind of drive like an asshole sometimes.
And do you think, I mean, which one do you think occurs more?
Well, I don't know. I think it depends. I think they both occur. Yeah, I think it depends on the person.
I mean, like just in daily life, do you think that it's the second one you talked about, or it just depends on the person?
I like the way you ask questions, and so I'm gonna ask you to answer that question for yourself. What way? Which one do
Well,
you?
that's why I was saying that, because I think that like 10 years ago, I think that the first one applied to me, where I was just in denial about so many things.
Right.
But in everyday life, I feel like the traffic thing, I do that all the time. I'm
Right.
a California roll queen,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, the second one, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's really the question is for each of us, you know, um, what's the level, what's the, and there's more types of denial than that. There's minimizing, there's rationalizing, there's, but the simple denial is just like that didn't happen, which I think it tends to be something that happens for a lot of people. And that's why the Buddha starts with let's come out of denial about so many things. But first of all, let's just acknowledge that there's suffering here. Let's stop avoiding it, right? And then that's like recognizing, oh, I have a gaping wound. That's like maggot infested. It's like, oh yeah, let's come out of denial about that, so that we can deal with it. Okay. So we're out of time. You can come back next week. But yeah, we're out of time. Sorry. Thank you for attending. Please, if you like what's happening here, help to support this center. There is a bowl for Donna. Donna is generosity. Generosity helps to keep the doors open and the center sustained. If you're online, thank you, Mark, for putting that up. You can click on the donation button and you can donate at againstthestream.com. Also Venmo, Against the Stream Meditation, which there's also a Venmo right next to that bowl if you don't have cash. So thank you for your time and attention. Oh, the suggestion is a $15 donation. Of course, pay what you can. All are welcome, regardless of ability to pay. Good, so we're just gonna gather all the blessings, all the goodness of our practice. And we're gonna dedicate our practice to the freedom from suffering for all beings. May all beings be free.